Here we are. So, welcome everybody. Don't get started. Let's select the stream. Let's get going. Hey everybody, my name's Jonathan Pickup. I've been teaching Vectorworks for over 30 years, so I really know what I'm doing. I used to write the Vectorworks manuals, so I've had a bit of fun using Vectorworks. So let's start with looking at some details. So I'm going to start with my elevations. This is a really complex building, so there are a lot of details that need to be drawn for this building. So the first thing I do is I actually create a bunch of details together. I look at the building, what needs to be drawn? What do we need to detail? Remember that the construction drawings are a way to communicate your intention to somebody else who's going to have to put it together. So it's really important that you communicate everything that they need to know. I'm the first to admit that there are a lot of details missing from this project. But even then, there are a lot of details in this project. So we can start with something simple. So where do I get all my details from? What do I do? So in Vectorworks, we draw in design layers. So I've got design layers for reports, I've got design layers for sections and elevations, and for some clients I work in a different way. In this particular client, I really like to work with elevations and sections which do the whole thing. So you can see here I've cut a plan and I've used the 3D model to give me the overall shape of the building. Then I start to build up the detail in the section. Why do I do that? Because I can grab that information and I can then use that to make a detail for it. So this section here, I then make sure that everything's going to work. I know that my flashing will work, I know that my windows will work, and I'll be able to work through that section properly. There's my roof detail. So I've taken some of these roof details and I'll draw them in this level of detail. Now also notice that when I draw these, I draw them so that the objects are separated. Now some parts I import from the manufacturer. So this barge flashing here, I actually imported from the manufacturer. This is the way they want it to work. It's got a clip fixing system and they rivet it to the roofing here. But notice that I've given a little bit of white space between that material and the next one, and between that flashing in here, and between that piece of timber. And so I've taken a whole lot of steps to try to make sure that my flashings and my objects are readable. They're separated. In details, I have to make sure that they're even more separated. But I'll take this information and I'll copy it to my design layer, where I'll then create my details. So let's have a look. I've got design layers for 1 to 5. Let's have a look, see what we've got. There's all my details. Now you can see that my details are really scattered around. I haven't taken a whole lot of trouble making sure that everything is all neat and tidy. But you'll see that some of them are in different places for different reasons. So this is my 0, 0 here. 0 and 0. It's just about there. So that's the center of my page. There's something there. Let's have a look, see what's right there in the middle. Oh, it's a piece of steel. Let's zoom back out. So if we have a look at the way that I create a detail, there are times where you need to import the manufacturer's information. You just have to, because you're using a product or a particular type of material. So I import those. And down here I've got a whole lot of them imported. Now I import a whole lot just to see which ones I might need. The challenge with this, of course, is that you import these details and they end up with some information that you can use and some that you can't. For example, you haven't got control over the font maybe. They may be really good, so I think I may have reused this detail. But there are other details that I don't reuse. But I just import as many as I can and then take from them what I can. So if we have a look at this detail here, you can see there's that clip fixing for that flashing on the side. I didn't use this part, so I took some information that I could use, but not all of it. But generally, I find that these details have got a lot of really valuable information. I need to study these. Now, if you're going to create your details, you have to remember the way that we have to keep water out of the building. Now, there are 4 main parts of detailing and 5 physics principles we have to look at. Number 1, the 4 Ds of detailing: deflection, drainage, drying, and durability. Where possible, make sure you can deflect the water away. So for example, in this situation here, any water that gets blown up into this area will dribble down, the gravity will pull that down. This flashing here is then keeping that water away. It's deflecting the water out. If we have a look here, the water can't get into here because it's being deflected down the roof. So number 1, deflection. Now if that doesn't work, for example, if that fails in somehow, I've got a drained cavity. So if any water gets through here, I've now got a drained cavity to keep the water away from my building. So I've got deflection, drainage is my backup plan. Durability. Drying is the next one. Drying is great. So for example, concrete block, bricks, those kinds of things dry after the sun comes out. So they might get wet to start with, but eventually they will dry. Now, these are a hierarchy. Number 1 is always deflection. Make sure you can deflect everything. If you can't deflect it, drain it, so you have a drained cavity. Some people call them rain screens. I was in Europe recently and I saw people with rain screen systems, and that was really cool. But that they then say, okay, well, this is a rain screen. I know water's going to get through, and then I'm going to have this is my building wrap here. So that's my level of protection. It's my next level of protection. We make sure that any water doesn't get through that, and then that will drain the cavity. So the water might get in, but we'll drain it. As I said, bricks are the drying, and the last one is durability. So if you can't deflect the water, if you can't drain the water, if you can't dry it, then for goodness sake, make sure it's going to be durable. Where I live, if the timber is in the ground, we treat it so that it's durable. There's lots of times where you put in a timber foundation, you can't drain it, you can't dry it, you can't deflect it, but by goodness, do we make sure it's durable? We treat it so that it doesn't rot in the ground. So that's one of the tricks I use, is to bring these details in. Now, that's the 4 Ds of detail. Really important, these 4 Ds of detailing. But there's also 5 physics principles that we have to be aware of when we detail. And the 5 physics principles are kinetic energy. So for example, in this case here, where I live, the wind will blow the water uphill. So it'll actually blow the water uphill here, and it'll blow the water and try and get it into the building. That's kinetic energy. Now there's a couple of tricks that this detail is using to stop the water getting in. Number 1, it's got this flashing that comes down. So this flashing is designed to try to prevent the water from getting up there. But if any water does get in here, then there's a stop end. They bend the steel up, they bend the roofing material up, and that stops the water being able to get up and over the edge. It's got to go uphill up the gravity. But it's got no kinetic energy by this stage because this flashing has stopped the wind. So that's kinetic energy. The next one is capillary action. Any materials that are close together, like these two here, if these are close together, then the capillary action, if there's any water here, the capillary action can allow that water to be sucked up. The capillary action will just drag that water up into that gap. How do we get around it? You'll notice that this has got a bit of a gap here that makes it wider. The capillary action is really for gaps that are less than 1/4 of an inch. If you get more than 5 millimeters, then the capillary action doesn't work. That's what this gap's all about. This gap here, 5 millimeter gap, that stops any water being sucked into there through capillary action. Now I'm testing my knowledge here. So we got kinetic energy, capillary action, surface tension. Surface tension of water allows water to stick to the underside of things. So what happens is any water on here will then stick onto the face of that metal. It will actually come around here, and the surface tension stops the water falling off at this point, but it'll try to come around. Now, this is what this little upstand here is for. The water, when it tries to come around and tries to climb uphill, it can't. So what happens, it gets to the end, there's a water droplet on the end, it can't travel through into the building, it drips off the edge. It's known as a drip edge. If you look at old stone buildings, every old stone building had a ridge underneath the sill, and that sill was the drip edge. That ridge stopped the water from being able to progress into the building. Some of this stuff is really old-fashioned. You know, we know that we've got really old things, old techniques that we know work. I just got to say hi, greetings from Germany. Hey, it's lovely to have you online. Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. I mean, if you look at the buildings in Germany, if you look at your old buildings in Germany, if you look at the stone sills, they will have a drip edge underneath them. We're not creating anything brand new. So let's go back to, so where were we? The 4 physics principles, so the 5 physics principles. Kinetic energy, surface tension, kinetic energy. One is pressure differential. So pressure differential is where the pressure outside the building is different from the pressure inside. Now, if the pressure inside is lower, it can suck water in. So for example, here we've got our flashing. The water wants to come up here, but it can't get up here beyond this point, and it dribbles out. But if it does, if this was a touching point here, and the water could suck up there, and the surface tension could drag that across, then it would fall down here. But of course, it can't get across this gap, and the water would drain out of the cavity. So again, the cavity is really useful for that, for the drainage. So we got capillary action, kinetic energy, pressure. Yeah, so the pressure differential helps it get through. There's one other. It'll come back to me. But anyway, we've got these principles that we have to make sure that our details actually match. So that's the physics things, or the physical things that we have to do. And so I always import these details from a manufacturer, find out whether they're any good, see the way that they've planned to make the building comply with these good principles. So in this particular project, we're using this Highland tray roofing. It comes down, there's a big flashing at the bottom, a big heavy flashing. So I'm thinking to myself, that's a great idea, let's use that. Now this is one that I've used. I can tell I've used this one because it's a group. It's got my timber in it. So you can see here, I've got some timber here. I'll just turn all my classes on. Yeah, because if I turn on the classes and I see those hatch lines there, those hash lines go across, I know that this is one of my details because that's my piece of timber. That's my piece of timber there. I've got the little dashed lines through here, and they're on a class called hatching. So do I use classes to control graphic style? Where's it gone? There was a hatch class. One of these was a hatch class. That one must be. There it is. So that makes my hatching disappear. So I use a symbol for that timber, and I find it much easier to draw if I use symbols to draw things. So this is a little symbol, this is a symbol, this is my jib board or my Gibraltar board. So I use this to represent the drywall. This I use to represent my rigid air barrier, and so on. Here's another detail. So I've taken the contractor's detail, or the manufacturer's detail, which is all the stuff out here, and then I've drawn what I want on the inside. So I've drawn that, I've drawn my insulation, and so on. So are there any questions about what we've just seen? So let's have a look. We've got lots of timber. So this is the detail I've drawn as well. So I need to have a lintel, a galvanized steel lintel to support my concrete blocks, heavy framing, there's my window detail, and there's my flashing here. So my flashing, I don't need a flashing at the head of the window because I've got a flashing here, which then any water that gets into my cavity will drain down here, it will go over my flashing, and it'll drain out here. I've got an open perp end in my concrete block, and that'll allow the water to drain out that way. We talked about pressure differential. This is an air seal in my window construction system. So any pressure differential between inside and outside, my air seal is going to take care of that. Yeah, I just can't. I can't. For some reason, I've forgotten the fifth one. So if anyone remembers the fifth physics principles, please leave me a comment and let me know. So there's the air seal again, and I always make sure there's a bit of room here for installing the window. This one's got a flashing. That's a line that goes around. So you'll notice that I use a lot of graphic lines to represent different materials. So I've got the hatching in my timber. I've got the drywall. I've got the hatching in my timber there as well. I've got dotted line for this material. I've got some dotted lines or some concrete. So step number one, wherever possible, try to import details that will going to solve your problem. Now, they're not going to solve every problem, particularly when you get a complex building like this one that we're looking at now. And there were a lot of details for us to look at. So I can zoom in and I can see wherever I've used my pink timber, that's me having a go at something. This might be a previous building. Because what happens, you do a really good set of competent details, you go to a new project. How do you get those details into the new project? I'll show you. So let's start blank document. Let's say, for example, that I want to start a whole set of detailing. So let's renumber or rename this. This is going to be my details. Now I always put the scale so that I know which details are which. So this is my scale. This is my details at 1 to 5. Now I'm actually going to put that back the way it was because I'm going to import my details from the other project. Right click, let's create a new file. I'm going to import layers. I'm going to choose some. I think these are on my desktop. I don't want you to see all my files, so I'm just going to put it there. Let's have a look. So I'm looking for one called Napier House. There it is. Okay, so I can import design layers from another project, and I can't import a design layer that always has the same name, so that's why I had to change it back. But the big trick is to make sure that you import your layer objects, because if you import your layer objects, you can import that entire design layer into your project and it will bring all those things through. Now it's real easy to miss that import layer objects, and you'll just miss everything. So now let's have a look. We should have got, and if you have a look, that's the same as this project. Let's have a look. So that's the project I started with. This is my brand new project here. You can't see a difference between them. So that's one of my tricks, is to import all the details you've drawn before and then start working on them again. So in this case here, what we've got is, this is a particular roof detail. You'll notice that this is from the roofing manufacturer. There's that 5mm gap again. I've got my stop end, I've got my angle, and I've got the flashing that they had, but now I've created my own flashing to do what I want. So I've used a two-stage flashing here. I've got one flashing that comes down, another flashing that comes underneath, because if you've ever seen a flashing get made, you'll know that you can't make a flashing that starts up here, goes all the way around here, comes down here and goes around there and goes back again. It's just so hard. But making it in 2 stages also allows this height here and this one here to be different as the building goes along the edge. What if this is an angled roof? It's on a slight angle. You really want to be able to make sure that you can control that easily. A 2-stage flashing allows one flashing to slide up behind the other, and you can get that to work really well. So don't be afraid to use that. So what I suggest we do is, I'm going to start a foundation detail. I'm going to look at how I'm going to draw a foundation detail. But I just wanted to show you that you can import all of your details together. Now, another trick that I use a lot is using elevations or creating details at the correct elevation. Now, in this particular project, we knew the elevation of the floor. Here it is here. So let's have a look. There's my floor there. I think that's my floor level. There's my floor there. And there's my dotted line. Now, I needed to make sure that I put all my floor objects at exactly the right elevation. So I used this line here. I created a guideline. I set it to the elevation of my building, my floor elevation of my building. Because that way I could then start to create my details really accurately, based on that elevation. So this is a concrete flooring system that you can put on timber framing, and it makes the building feel like concrete. We had a combination of concrete and timber framing for the floor, but the client wanted to feel the same, or the architect wanted the building to feel the same wherever they walked. I've imported this part from the manufacturer, and I've attached it to my detail, which I've drawn here. So I've got a particular product that we use here, which is called Posi Strut, and it's a metal frame. There's a timber at the top, timber at the bottom, and the metal separates the timber and creates the strength. But these are light. One person on site can pick up one of these and carry it easily. Big long ones, they can carry them easily because they're really light. They're really just the weight of 2 bits of timber and a small amount of metal in between. So this object is a symbol. You can see there it's a symbol. So once I've made that symbol, it was very easy for me to put that symbol together. What's this object here? That's just the 2 bits of timber, 2 rectangles, and that is a symbol that I use to put them together to make up that object. This one here is a timber object. It's a symbol. A timber object is an object I've made. I do know that Vectorworks has got their own. If we look at detailing, there's a timber object here. You can make one with the Vectorworks object, and you can change the size of it. The reason I use my timber object, I'm not sure if it's in my workspace. I better find it. Let's do the find timber. Let's look at my tools. No, it doesn't seem to find it. I might have to add that, and you might have to watch me add that to my, is it there? No. So let's grab that piece of timber. I'll make a copy of it. So the reason I made this object was because I wanted a piece of timber object that I could stretch, and it would still maintain that stretchability. This, I didn't find you could stretch it. You can type in the size that you want, but often I need to just be able to stretch it and put in the size that I need without thinking about the size as such. I know this one you can make it as rough, you can make it blocking, and you can make it finished. My one, I can't make it finished. I can make it framing, I can make it blocking. I can make it none, and I can make it LVL if I need LVL timber. And sometimes you'll see in my drawings that I've used this as well, the LVL. Laminated veneer lumber, if you prefer. So that's the basics of detail. Now, how do I actually create my details? I showed you before that a lot of them I migrate from another project so that I've got them. I've always got lots of symbols that I use to create the details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the concrete. We're going to create a concrete slab. And what do? How do I start a detail? I start with what I know. So let's start here. We're going to make a concrete slab. Now, concrete, we could, I guess, start with a rectangle, or we could start with the polygon. We're going to create a piece of concrete. So my concrete goes along here, comes down. Maybe I've got a concrete block one, so I'm going to show you a concrete block detail as well. But let's say, for example, we're just coming down. We're going to come down about 4 feet. This is about 8 inches across, so 200 millimeters. And then I'm going to come back up, and it's going to be less than this amount. So I've got a 150 slab, maybe 6-inch slab. I'm working on one at the moment with a 6-inch slab. Now I've hit the G key to create a datum. If I then tab into this datum area, I can say 0, I don't want it to go left or right, but I want this to be minus 6 inches, minus 150. And so I can click there, and it's created that minus 150 for me, which I think is really cool. So this is minus 180 for the angle. Oh, it's measuring from my datum. So let's go back here. We'll go G again, reset my datum, and then double click to finish. Now I need to apply the hatch to that. So I need to find my attributes palette, which of course was on my other screen. So now what I can do is I can then apply a hatch to that. I can find my concrete hatch. Where's my concrete? Let's look in this project here. Let's look for concrete. because I've got a particular concrete that I like to use, concrete 1 and concrete 2, which I can't remember where they came from. They came from concrete 1, there's concrete 2. No, it must be concrete 1 I want. I can't remember where I got these from. I've just collected these over the years. So wherever you see someone with good hatches, ask if you can't give them some hatches in exchange for some good hatches that they've got. And that's where I've collected most of my hatches from. Now I need to make a heavy line. We need to have heavy lines, and we really need to make sure that when we detail, we're detailing with the right kind of graphics. That is, the line weights are important. The line weights represent the density of the material and the hierarchy of information. So concrete is really important. It needs to have a heavy line. The ground's important. It also needs to have a heavy line. But we also need to make sure we use a graphic symbol that people recognize as concrete. Now the reason for that is because details are internationally understandable if you use the right graphics. There is an international way of thinking about details that with the graphics that we use. We put cross-hatching in timber to represent solid, continuous timber. We put a single line to represent discontinuous or blocking timber. So there are some things that are just always common that we use. Now that works pretty well, but you can make it improved. Now this project should have a lot of classes in it. Let's get rid of that and let's look at detail. And there should be a lot of classes. Now remember, I imported this layer from the other project and it came through with all of these classes. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to reset all of the graphics. That was solid, that was thin. Now we should have here a class called detail-concrete. Let's right click and assign to my selection, and always do this, always use the graphic attributes. And now by using a class, I'm telling the class to control the graphic style of that object. Hey, if you've got a question, don't forget to leave me a chat. I'm looking for the chats just in case there's some questions there. Now that's pretty cool, isn't it? This ability to use a class to do that, so that when I've got a DPC, a damp proof course to go in here, and I want that to be just 2 millimeters off the edge, so I'm going to hit the G key, I'm going to go up 2 millimeters, and I'm going to draw my line across, and I just want that to go across horizontally. Now at the moment, of course, it's going to relate to my G key, so let's go back to there again, reset my G key, and it doesn't want to reset. So we've got 2 millimeters, hit the G key again to reset that, and then I can draw across my DPC and double click. Sorry, a single click for that one because it's a line. And then I've got one here, DPC, so I can right click and I can assign that to my selection, and that should then have the line style that I want for my DPC. Assign to selection, and that should be all attributes by class. That's much better. And so if I turn on my zoom line thickness, you can see that I've actually got different line thicknesses for those objects. Now we need some timber to go on here. So do we have a symbol for my timber? And if we have a look here untitled, we should have timber. There should be a piece of timber here. We're going to have a bottom plate. We're going to have this one for the bottom plate. And this particular one is green because it's supposed to be to a different timber treatment system. So here we are. Which way do we want to do this? We've got the standard insertion. We've got the left control line. We've got the center control line, right control line. So I actually don't want it to be right there. So I'm going to hit the G key again. I'm going to go, I want that to come across by 6 millimeters. I'll make it 10 millimeters because I like it to stand out. I want it to be 2 millimeters up, and then I can double click and that'll place my timber, and you can see I've got that little bit of white space between those objects so that I can see them easily. When I print these, they'll print really nicely because of that little bit of white space. I think it's really important to have that white space between the objects, otherwise they all mesh together, and when you print them, the contractor can't see the differences. So what's next? Well, we need to have a rectangle to represent our blocking or our studs going up. So let's put that one on there. Now, as I start to get into these things, you start to think, you know, wouldn't it be easier if you just had something that could do this for you? So I'm going to pull that back. Now I'm holding the shift key down so I can pull that back and it doesn't go out of alignment. How about some jibboard? Well, the Vectorworks has got some really cool tricks. So if I look at the detailing, there's this one here I use a lot, which is my linear material. G key, tab, -2 millimeters. Start there. We're going to go up. And I want that to be G key again. Tab, 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 and -2 again. And I can click. And I'm going to double click at this point, and that should create my linear material. Now I didn't set my linear material ahead of time. So the offset can be set. This is only 10 millimeters thick, which is 3/8 I think. The closure, I can put a closure in if I want. So where's it started? So it started in the wrong place. I've got it back to front really. So let's give it an offset of, I should have started at the top and come down. I'm just having a look, see if I can flip it over. So I'll just move it. So move -10. So there it is there. I want closures top and bottom maybe, or at least a closure at the start. So it's got a closure at the end, at the start there. What kind of board is this? Is this plaster? No, I don't want that. Is it jibboard? That's not bad. So it's jibboard. So it's got that sort of dash in the inside it. It does tend to create this double line here, which if you don't like, you can get rid of, and we can assign, let's put that back to board generic, and then we might have a class that we can use. I think I got one here called jibboard, assign to selection. Has it got the right, because it's got that on. Now the other way to draw this is just to draw this as a rectangle or a polygon and do it that way. I've got some rigid air barrier to go on the outside, and I could use a rectangle to do that. So my rectangle is, this stuff's only I think 4 millimeters. It's really thin. It's less than 1/4 of an inch. So let's go 4 millimeters. Now it should really go 50 millimeters below, or 2 inches below this point. So again, I'm going to use that same trick. G key, tab, tab, tab. What do I want? This one here, I want that to be -50 millimeters. And you can see it's popped down there 50 millimeters. It should only be 4 millimeters wide. And we've got a rigid air barrier, that's this one here. Right click, assign to selection, and it gets the graphic of my style. So if you have a look, all of these classes have been used to create my details using classes and the graphic style of my classes. So we'll come back to that. So what I was thinking was, should I show you, you guys let me know in the comments, do you want me to show you how I can create these classes into a really quick drawing system? So it's so that they automatically generate the classes. Let me know if you want that. Next strategy I need some timber. So I've got a cavity here. This is my cavity batten. Now the cavity batten is ready for drawing the other side, so I need to place that and then flip it. Let's right click on that object. Let's go rotate, and we'll flip it. I'm going to flip it horizontally. There we are. Now sometimes what I do with these objects is to edit that symbol. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of it. Now you'll notice that the insertion point of my symbol, that's the insertion point of my symbol there, is just a little bit away from the edge of my object, just a tiny bit. And the reason for that is that if I have that symbol the right way round, what I can do is grab the insertion point of that symbol and stick it to objects. So let's just put a locus on there. Now if you don't use loci, you really got to learn to use these loci. Now a 2D locus, that's this one here, this is a cross, sometimes called a point in AutoCAD. So that's, I'm going to put a locus there. Now the great thing about the locus is that it's a non-printing element. If you make it a master snap, you can show it outside. So what does that look like? When I go near it, you'll see a little red dot. That's my master snap point just here. Now a master snap point takes precedence over other snaps, so that master snap point takes precedence over this corner point here, which means when I zoom out, I can grab hold of that object. I can then stick it here on my rigid air barrier, and what do I get? I get a separation. I get that white space between them, which I find is really cool. Then I can go to my manufacturer, I can grab his cladding material, I can then flip it if I need to, drag it onto this part here, and then I've got the start of my detail. So that's how I start to generate my details. Now if we start to have a look at what would be a really cool way of making this happen, what would be a great way of making this do it on its own. So let's try this out. Let's say that we want to create a DPC, or damp-proof membrane. Cool. So we've got a DPC. We're going to make that the active class. I'm going to try drawing a polyline. I want to check it to make sure it picks up the graphic style. Now if it doesn't, I'm going to go back to this class and I'm going to make sure that when I create this class, I create it so that it does do what I want. And what's missing is this tick box here to use at creation. So there it is there. There's the line weight. That's my line style there. There's my line weight. Okay. Yes to all. Now, if I try that again, get my polyline, click. You can see it creating the line style as we go. Sweet. So I know it's working. So the trick I've got is to go Tools, Custom Tool Attribute. I want it to remember the fill, the pen, the end markers. I'm not so worried about the font, but I want it to remember the tool and my smart cursor settings, which are these ones here. Those are my smart cursor settings. I'm not sure I want it to remember the layer, but I certainly want it to remember the class. And it's not a symbol, so I don't have to worry about it remembering the symbol. Okay, so I need a palette for this. So I'm going to call this Detail Drawing. And this is drawing my DPC, so I'm going to call it Draw DPC. Cool. So I've now got a little palette over here. Now if it's not working properly, I'm going to have to make a slight edit because there was something that didn't work before. Okay, so let's try this out. Let's make none the active class. Let's find none. So none is my active class up here. So none's my active class there. We got, okay, so let's try this out. So my selection tool is my active tool. So let's go double click on this. And you notice it's picked this tool and it's set my class. Now what happens is this then doesn't change back to what it should do. It should really revert back to none. There's something going on here and I just need to edit this to make it work for me properly. But if once you've created this drawing details, what if you did that on another project and you created a whole set of them? What are we looking for? Scripts. And we created one called Drawing Details. Let's import that. Let's replace, we're going to replace the tool command, do this for all my actions. Okay, let's go Window, Script Palettes, Drawing Details. It's probably on the other screen, is it? Yep, there it is on the other screen. Let's bring it in. Okay, so well, I can't remember where we were before. Let's just use our previous view to get back there. Right, so we're drawing in the middle. So now I want to draw my concrete. So let's start with my concrete. So I think we had a piece of concrete that was like this. We zoomed in just a little bit too far. Let's draw our concrete. And you notice it's got the concrete hatching that I wanted. Yeah, that's good. Okay, let's Probably about right. So let's draw that. So, oh yeah, that's much better. So it's about 900 deep, 900, click, and 200. And the other trick I use, I should have explained this, I guess. Now, there's an option here which is data bar options, and I've always got mine set to allow numeric keypad entry, and this will really speed up your drawing of details. So let's go double click, draw concrete. So I'm going to come across here, click. I want to come down 900, so I just have to type 900, enter once, enter again. I'm coming across 200, 200, enter, enter. Come back up here. Now don't forget my trick here where I went G key and I went tab, tab, tab minus 150. Enter again and then line up with that object there. We should better line up with those two and double click to finish. And it fills with concrete. So I need a piece of timber at the bottom here. What do we need first? We need some DPC. So double click on draw DPC. And I could do that trick again, but I'm just going to do it and then move it up by 2 millimeters. So there's my DPC. Now the DPC, why isn't it working? We need to go back to our classes and make sure that our classes were set correctly. So if we go back and have a look at all my details, so my detail classes, all of these classes, because I imported them, they didn't come through with the correct settings, which I want them all to use at creation. This was the DPC we just used. Let's edit that. That should be used at creation again. Every class should be used at creation for these kinds of details. Jib, is that used at creation? Now let's edit that. No, let's turn that back on. Yes to all. Now, it's a real hassle for me to do that right now. It would be so much easier if this was part of my template and that these were already set so that whenever I open a project, these are already in the template. My class is already in the template and I've already created all of these. Now, I'm not sure I can do all of these together. Let's just try that, edit it. Oh yeah, I can do this. I can do a whole bunch of them all together. Steel sections, timber, wall lining, let's just edit all of those, use it creation, turn them all on, and yes to all. That should help. It should really help. Concrete, I've got all my cladding systems here, let's edit those. We'll use it creation again, and my cavity and my building wrap. Let's turn the use it creation on for those. Okay. So hopefully now a lot of these are going to work just the way I want. I need a piece of timber. Now, I can also use this option, so I can use this option here, custom selection, custom tool attribute. So let's say we want to place a piece of timber. Let's have a look here. This project here we're looking at. I need some timber, which was here. That's my fill there, that's my skirting, my baseboard. That was this one. I want that one. So I want that one. I want to place that one there. So I grab that. Let's just go up here, check our class. I don't think we need to worry about our class for this. So let's go custom tool attribute. So we go custom tool attribute. Yes, we want to remember all the stuff. But now you tick the symbol. And then you say to the symbol, okay, I want you to remember that. I want you to remember the symbol. I want you to remember the class. Let's click OK. And we're going to put in the drawing details, and we're going to call this place 140 by 45 bottom plate. Okay, so now now what happens? We go back to our selection tool, we go, I want to place my 140 by 45 bottom plate. Great, I got one there. And it's remembered this, I think. Maybe not, let's just try that. No, I don't think it's remembered that. It's just what I had selected last. So I can put my 140 in. There's my 140, and I can stick it there. Now, if I use this a lot, now I haven't done this with this particular one because I don't want this always be offset. But I could do, I could place that, I could change or put a locus in to help me place that correctly. So there's my bottom plate. I've actually chosen the wrong one, I think. Oh no, I still had the wrong one. J-click. I want that symbol. Let's get rid of that one. Now, if you don't know this trick with the J-click, it's really handy. If you've got multiple objects, one on top of the other, you can hold down the J key and then click, and it'll allow you to select or choose which one you're selecting. So we want some insulation. Wrong side. There we are. Let's get rid of that. Now that insulation should be on the class insulation. I don't know why, but it's not doing what I want. But if I put it on the insulation class, it should go pink. There it is. And there should be a line up here, which is the line tool. And I'm using keyboard shortcuts. So number 2 is the line tool. I want to draw a jib board. And I can never remember whether I go up or down. I think this one here I go up. There's my jib board. I want to draw some rebar. And so, no, where's my rab? Draw rab. Yeah, draw rab. Now this one again, I need to go down, because if you look up here, you can see which side I'm drawing. I'm drawing on that side, so I'm going to come down. And so that's given me my my rigid air barrier. And those are the tricks that I use to really speed up the drawing. Copying information from other places. Let's have a look. I've got a concrete block here, so we could start with. Let's draw a concrete. So I'm going to draw concrete. It's going to be a rectangle shape. So this is going to be 350 in that direction. Click. We're going to come down 250. Come across, and of course if I hit the K key, it just closes it for me. Now I need to place some concrete blocks. Now this would be quite handy if you do the center one. You can find the center of your block or your concrete, and now just place that. Get the next one, and this time I'm going to go to the left side and double click, and I can just keep placing those. Now you might notice when I place this concrete block, there's a couple of things that it does. Number one, the insertion point of my block, let's just go back to my block, edit the 2D components. The insertion point is just off this piece of mortar. So let's put in a 2D locus so you can see it. We'll make it master snap point, we'll show outside. So now you can see the little red dot. That's the point that lines up my blocks. So when I place one on top of the other, I'm placing them by this corner, and the blocks line up perfectly. I mean, if you really want to, I can change the color of the mortar in this area here if you want that to make a little bit make it look a little bit different. So those are some of the tricks I use to do that. I've got electrical lines. I draw rebar. The rebar will draw a polygon. And that's my reinforcing bar. If you want to make the corners roundy, if you want to round the corners, don't forget you can use your reshape tool here. So this is I'm going to put a 6mm, so that'll be 6 in that. For that corner there, that's 6, and that's 6, and then the outside corner, this is 12, so that must be 18. What am I doing? Oh, I'm not doing the right one. Okay, so that one, and this was 6, I think, for the inside one. That makes a lot more sense to me. I was wondering why it wasn't changing. And then I can put my rebar. I can put a circle in there for the rebar. So that's another trick I use to get that, is to have all these things set up. So I set these all up. I put them into my building and to my template, so that whenever I start a project, it's got all of these parts. Even down to placing the my weatherboard. So if we look at my weatherboard, we want that weatherboard to be a specific height. So let's go to that line up there. Now this needs to be about 50 millimeters down. So let's just, that is not 50 millimeters, but I could measure it and drop it down the right amount. The reason I've got that locus and this locus up here is because they snap together. So if we find those, what's the trick? Right click, locate symbol in resource manager. There it is there. Double click to make it active. And I can start to click those together, and you can see that clicks onto that next one. Double click. I made these so that I can start at the top and I can work my way down. And because of those loci, it makes it really quick to snap those together. Now I could calculate the height and I could use my offset and duplicate array and all those other things, but sometimes I just want to be able to snap those things together. And that's the technique I use, is these loci that actually help me snap these together. So this is James Hardy's linear weatherboard, which is a cellulose cement product, and it's a bevel back. And I figured, or I went to the manufacturer, I calculated what size it needed to be. They gave me the dimensions, so I just drew it. But those loci are the things that allow you to snap stuff together really well. It makes it so quick. I think I've pretty much covered all the stuff that I wanted to cover today. I don't see any questions, so hopefully I've helped you guys with some detailing, and I've helped you to explain the way I draw details. I just make sure that I draw everything. In this case here, I was drawing the steel work, and I've placed these at the correct elevation so that I can give the steel manufacturer the bench heights for all of my steel work. I know exactly how high the steel needs to be. I started with the detailing of the floor. I know how deep this needs to go, and so I could calculate all of my details. And I'm a big one for drawing really accurate details. You've got to think your way through the design. You've got to follow that detail. What does my friend Steve say? So Professor Steve, he's a friend of mine, and one of the things he said is that he always looks at details in 6 directions: forward, back, left, right, up and down. You've got to make sure that your detail works in all those directions. You've got to follow the detail around the building and make sure you've detailed everything. So sometimes you'll see that I create a lot of information together. So how do these come together? How does that relate to this detail? How does that relate to that detail? How does this work together? And then I'll sometimes break that into 3 or 4 different details and put them into the construction. So this was a detail here. I used this detail. We got different manufacturers, different situations here. So I drew this detail. Then I've got another one where there's a piece of steel. How do we want that to work? What do we want to do for the soffit? How's the soffit going to look? Is there another one? Oh yeah, so let's follow that across. How does that work when it hits the wall? How does that work when it goes inside? So follow your details through the building. I hope you enjoyed that. This is the sort of thing I cover on my community. If you don't know, I've got a community that where people with Vectorworks, we get together on a regular basis. I answer their questions. I'll put a link in the description, but you should check it out. And if you haven't checked it out, I'm pretty sure someone here has already checked it out. Don't forget to have a look at it. It's called Vectorworks Training School. I'm just going to bring up my web browser. I'll show you what it looks like. So here it is here. This is what I've got. This is my community. So we've got a whole lot of courses. There's a foundation course, architect course. If you're a landscaper, we've got the 3D modeling. We've got a lot of classroom activities going on. It's a really active community going on as well, where people are asking questions and people are answering them. So check this out. It's a fantastic community, and people are really getting a lot of really good information out of this. They're finding it really, really useful. It's a growing community. I'm really happy with it. So think about checking that out. Really worthwhile. Thanks for watching. I'm going to close the meeting now. There's no questions. Graham, I'm really happy I helped you. Don't forget, if you need to get in touch with me, send me a comment. If it's something really important, I also do online training as well, so maybe it's something I can do to help you individually if that's what you need. But thank you for coming, Graham. It means a lot that someone actually left a comment. See you later, everybody.